So tonight's topic is the body discloses, advanced body reading and releasing techniques. I always like to start with a few propositions that we can agree on and take into our work together. The first proposition is this: our body is a prime instrument in becoming an effective breathworker. I don't think I'm going to get a lot of argument on this case, but we're going to look into it more deeply tonight, because breath is what connects us to source on all levels: body, mind, and spirit. All aspects of ourselves are present and engaged when we coach our clients. Our spiritual presence and our mental acuity play a direct role in creating safety and understanding for our clients. But if our body is not fine-tuned to the body of our clients, it will often unconsciously trigger aspects of trauma and fear that they come to us to heal. If we're blind to these parts of ourselves, it can transmit messages of mistrust to our clients and inhibit their freedom of release. No, we don't have to have a completely pure and healed physical form, but having awareness of our holding patterns in our bodies can be a significant advantage in not going into collusion with those patterns which resonate in our clients. Our bodies will pick up signals from our clients as they arise in a session, and we're able to distinguish what is theirs and what is ours. So we're not projecting on them or taking their projections onto ourselves. Even further, it opens the door to potential mutual exploration and healing on many levels. Proposition 2. As a breathworker, you have the ability to grow in your sensitivities to messages from your clients and your own body, and thereby coach more effectively as you model and make suggestions for breath modulation. Now, here's where we advance upon our topic of community building last class, because we're drawing in the sources of wisdom from our community. There are sources of wisdom from thousands of years. For example, the Chinese have over 3,000 breath techniques, as well as modern breakthroughs in examining the neurophysiological aspects of healing to help us discern in greater detail the physical signals of under or over-regulation. Babette Rothschild has a chart, and it shows in detail how you recognize the physical signals in the body of a client that you're working with as to whether it is under-regulated, regulated, or over-dysregulated. It's an amazing work that Babette did, and she was doing it mainly as a trauma counselor. But as we're talking about sharing community wealth of knowledge, I use it in my work all the time as a breath worker. So we in therapeutic breathwork have a very distinct study of the themes that we read in people's bodies to distinguish lifelong holding patterns in their breathing and exercises that are directed to those specific themes. So I'll summarize these in a few minutes. But regardless of the learning available from a growing number of resources in the worldwide breathwork movement, each of us builds an internal database from our experiences in and out of breathwork sessions and a personal repertoire of techniques that work best for us as a coach. I mention this to help us keep a balance from our yang impulses to want to know every theory and every technique available and take every course that's available. It has to be balanced by our yin counterpart, which advises us that We just have to get really good at what resonates most in our being, in our bodies, and bring this to bear in our presence in the right way with each client. So I've done my share of both over the years. I've remembered and resurrected a technique that I learned in graduate school when it was useful for a particular client. I've also did work in psychosynthesis, took a workshop myself, and bring that up when it resonates and is useful in a particular occasion with a client. I mostly, though, rely on 3 or 4 standard techniques that have worked best for me over the years. Circular breathing, inner child visualization, conscious connected breathing. What I've observed is that a process that someone has field tested and integrated well may be received better and be more effective with a client than some of the latest and highly promoted skills that are all the rage. Clients will sense your safety and care with which you use a process with them, as well as pick up on a routinized cookie cutter technique you're using for convenience. As you stay tuned in the present, you will instinctively know when to reach into your toolbox for a particular technique, as well as when to stick with a regular favorite. A key for me is always ask my client if they are willing to experiment with a process and then give them a general description of it. Or I will describe 2 different techniques. For example, if I'm thinking, oh, maybe an anger release would work well now, but maybe that's not where this client is at. Maybe something a little softer. So I'll describe both the techniques to them and say, which one would you prefer? This gets them on board with agency in the session. And when they buy into experimentation, it takes us both further from the expectations of a pass-fail test. You know, if this technique or this exercise we're going to do is really going to work for you, because we'll get useful information from whatever happens. I can't count the number of times I've done something and the person says, well, I really didn't feel anything. I say, all right, so what does that tell us? No, it's not about Jim is running the wrong flag up the pole. That you could conclude that. But if we look a little more carefully, what I had anticipated, the person was not ready for. That there's a part of them that is on alert and saying, no, that's very useful information. So this collaborative approach can in itself be a new learning and consciousness changing experience for many. It's like, you mean the coach is actually asking me what works for me? Okay. So the body discloses, signifies an approach to breath work, which puts us in our bodies with our clients. It's been said that one highly attuned to the breath and body can read a person's history from observing their one inhale and exhale. Well, that sounds pretty far-fetched to me at first hearing it. But when I remembered the training work I had done with a teacher called Tom Brown Jr., also known as the Tracker, I recognized that there were things that we pick up intuitively and may not even be recognizing, a whole lot of things. So Tom had been mentored from when he was a young boy by a Southern Lipan Apache scout named Stalking Wolf, who taught him to live well anywhere by reading the body of the earth. Tom became sensitized to every environment, from seemingly barren desert or frozen tundra to the jungles of the woodland or the city. As a scout, he learned the art of invisibility, such that as an experiment, he once lived undetected off the land, no dumpsters, in Central Park of New York City for 3 months. As a test, when we went to his trainings, he would tell us that he would be within 3 feet from the road, just up the pike here a little bit, and we were to come and find him. Well, we went on the road, we looked, and no one could find him. He would jump out, surprising us all, right under our nose. So when we got up in the morning during the training and gathered together near his barn, he would look at the ground and he'd tell us what time during the night each wild animal came across the barnyard and what they did when they encountered each other, just by reading their tracks. He demonstrated to us up to 300 indices in each track that told not just what animal it was and how long ago it was they were there, but the age of the animal and any injuries or deformities it had. That is, somewhat of its life history by how it trod on the earth. He also taught us we had this, given the patience and determination and sensitivity and courage, the ability to pursue these skills. It did not take superhuman sensitivity or powers. Each step of the learning utilized sensitivities we all have, but just built upon layer by layer. Yes, Tom had an amazing teacher, but after a while, when Stalking Wolf passed, the earth itself was Tom's teacher. I respectfully submit that we are all trackers of the breath. We all have started to cellularly catalog our awarenesses and sensitivity to the bodies of our clients who sit or lie before us, breathing, moving, talking, and revealing their life history. Just one breath is like a pebble dropped in a pond at the diaphragm and ripples out toward the head and the feet in opposite directions. Now, along the way, it reveals any tensions, holding patterns, traumas that restrict the free flow of movement in that breath, be it in the pelvis, the limbs, the torso, the jaw, indeed every joint and tissue of the body. Their inhale communicates to us how they're taking in life and how they adjust to it throughout their body. Every exhale shows us how they're willing to let go and release, to surrender to the process of cleansing the body of what's no longer needed, and trusting in the process of replenishment with the next inhale. Often the challenge with completely exhaling is people aren't quite sure they're going to get another breath. And so they cut it off, as they do many things in life. So as much is told to us by the exhale as the inhale, much of this learning is out of our conscious awareness. But because we've made the conscious intention to be a loving observer, our energies are automatically being directed towards what will assist the recovery of the full aliveness of our clients. If we do not have this intention, our energies might not have any more influence on them than someone sitting at a bus stop as we drive by. Indeed, we do influence everyone in the universe by our very existence, but the quality of love and aliveness is exponentially, mutually increased when we have a conscious contract to be a breath worker for someone. Taking up the profession of breath worker is a commitment to increasing our loving consciousness and resourcefulness every client along the way. This is why I so enjoy being with fellow trackers of the breath, because just by our presence together, we're increasing our consciousness and power of our loving intentions. So, what do we learn from the first 6 years of our human life? Alexander Lowen was my stalking wolf. He was an astute student of healing the body, tracking its symptoms to their origins, rather than just categorizing symptoms into diagnoses and, quotes, curing them by masking their effects with chemical straitjackets. His iconoclastic work in the medical field and his prolific documentation of lifelong strategies of characterological coping with the stress originating from decisions we made early in life about ourselves and our world, for me, opened the door to a neurodivergent revolution. Rather than looking at people as sick or dysfunctional, as determined by a list of symptoms and the length of time they endured, he studied types of adaptation to developmental challenges and proposed a continuum of integration achieved through strengths that they learned in their adaptation to life. I translated these types into themes that are universal to all humans. That is, we all participate in each of these themes and evolve to our own level of integration with each, thus making us unique, but not pathological. Each person tends to have a nodal theme which portrays their go-to defense under stress, as well as their place of special learning and gifts when integrated. Each of these themes has characteristic breathing patterns and psychological traits associated with how they've handled the developmental challenge at that stage of their life and how they've evolved subsequently. Now, here's a brief summary, but let's put them in this context now of our becoming breath trackers. This is the themes that Alexander Lowen described, and I translated into less pathological terms. He still was a psychiatrist, and he still used some of that terminology that we now can take the rough edges off and emphasize the strengths rather than the unintegrated parts. So these are going to be more fully studied, of course, in our training programs. This is just a brief touch-in right now. Let's see, let's go to the first one. The psychic sensitive stage of life, which is birth to immediately after birth, where we're discovering how safe we are in our bodies. So you can see that this is not the sick or the healthy. This is a continuum from unintegrated when frozen in fear to more integrated when the fear is released and the sense of vitality in life is restored. Basic theme here after birth is I'm not safe in the world or in my body. The holding pattern is one of fragmentation and the breathing is frozen. With the integration comes I flow with the wondrous kaleidoscope of life. Many of our greatest artists and theoreticians used the gifts of being out of the body to increase their sensitivity and their psychic powers. It was like a way of staying alive. But as they become more and more integrated, well, they could sell their paintings. They could become a nuclear physicist. They could do all sorts of things with these gifts of this stage. For breath workers, we're helping them mobilize their chest. That was frozen in order to cut off that fear of not being safe. And so as a breath worker, when we recognize this pattern, we don't say, breathe as fast, as hard, and deep as possible, because they're gone. They leave their body. So we help them gradually, first of all, just by our rapport with them. We help them create a place of safety. And so little by little, they can let go of that frozenness. I had one client who was extremely psychic sensitive. And even though I would very gently coach him to breathe, he would always breathe and go into tetany because he said that was the first time he ever felt being in his body. He was like feeling the pain of tetany. Well, we worked with that so that he didn't have to, again, cause pain in order to recognize he had a body. So taking a full breath is something that takes patience. And if we recognize and have patience with ourselves, your psychic sensitive clients will sense your warmth. They don't expect you to know everything or to save them, but just the fact that you accept them and you respect their boundaries and you work with them at a pace that's right for them will go a long ways. That's why in our school, we don't teach a one-size-fits-all breathing. The second stage in the first year of life, we're deciding, is there enough for me? Well, it's safe enough to stay alive, but is there enough for me? When the senses of depletion and abandonment, the body shows that. And again, if you cause them to overbreathe, they will do that, but collapse. It's not leave their body like the psychic sensitive, but there'll be a sense of collapse. There is a feeling of abandonment, first of all, because they learned how to care for their caregivers who weren't there enough for them. They were too involved in whatever needs that they needed to be met. So they become very empathetic and began taking care of others at a very early age. Oh, I don't cry now, I don't make a mess, and eventually abandon their own needs. They felt abandoned by others, they end up abandoning themselves. And in the beginning, they're great. Things go to their head. They're very intelligent, they're oral, they are very good talkers, but they have a dependency need for you to care for them. If you foster that need, you may feel good because, oh, I'm doing great things, but you're not helping them. What we are there as breath workers to do is to help them get back to the source within them. We want to help them sustain a charge without doing it for them, to increase acknowledgement and self-confidence, and to bring the breath up to the chest gradually. Increase their awareness of those abandoned and depleting themes. And we can use affirmations to have them, like a mantra, repeat to themselves that they are enough, do enough, have enough. Increase the energy in their legs because they had to grow up and stand tall very fast. And so the legs can be locked and not very resilient. And during a breathwork session, also to help them decrease the amount of talking that they like to do because they're very oral. And just if something is important, we can talk about it later, but to stay with the breath. Now, when the body starts to move around and explore the environment on its own, it given a safe environment in which to discover their own abilities to explore and to control their bodies. Or are they controlled or manipulated and seduced? So here, the breath is held out. It's not depleted like the empathetic nurturing or frozen like the psychic sensitive. Here in the inspirational leader stage, they've had to puff up and rise above their feelings, lest they be manipulated or controlled anymore. And so they want to be the one in charge. So there's two patterns here, the overpowering, which is the one that's shown right here, and they're holding people away from their chest, from their heart. The first two types have difficulty taking a full inhale. These next two types have difficulty exhaling and letting go, let people close to them, letting down into their feeling body. So they feel a loss in safety when they're not in a power struggle. We want to help them complete that exhale and be able to accept support from other people, not always have to be the one in charge and have the last word. The last thing you want to do as a breath worker is get into a competitive power struggle with them. Doesn't help them at all. There's a second type, which is more seductive, And it's not quite so obvious that it's all upper body. It's more, the tension is more evenly displaced, but it's held on the inside. You never really get to their heart. They're very ingratiating. They would make a great used car salesman, but uh, they don't really surrender to their feelings. So we're helping them feel safe in letting go of the always having to be in charge and holding their chest out. Increase awareness of their body feelings and sensations, and get out of the always having great ideas. So increase strength and safety in the legs for their fear of falling. The next stage of life, the second to the fourth year, is where feelings become more nuanced. They're not just crying or happy. They have greater neurological development and can be controlled with guilt and shame. And in every family, it's communicated what feelings are okay and what feelings are not okay. So here, a split can occur between the good me, which always loves what mom's cooked and wants a second helping, and gets stuffed because they are taking in approval and expectation, but they can't let out and tell the truth about whenever they don't feel good or whenever they're angry. And so that's like a squashed experience, and the body takes that on. They'll be your best breathwork client because they'll do anything you ask, but alas, it doesn't really work. They have trouble truly putting their heart into it. And so they're not there to please you. They're there to discover what their genuine feelings are and get out of being the good me, the bad me, the good girl, the bad girl, good boy, bad boy, and being the authentic, truly feeling one. And then their heart is liberated. Then even their body takes on a much lighter sense of approachability. They're a great helper. They have ability to stick with things and support others. But what they've learned is not to do it at their own expense, so they become a martyr. The body themes here, again, instead of just being squashed and held in, it's still a steadfast, supportive theme, but there's a greater sense of freedom, of relaxation in the muscle systems. The fifth in the gender balance is like the third to the fifth year of life. Here we're dealing with, can I express myself as a male or a female in a natural way? Or was the environment telling me, oh, you can't be a threat to father and be too masculine? So the man takes on more of a soft, a feminine, accepting approach. But on the inside is still pretty strong, but it can't be shown directly. So sarcasm may come out more than genuine expression of anger or strength. And the same with the female, whose femininity was a threat in the environment. She got a strong jaw and is very set in defiance, especially against male authority. No, when they're integrated, the gender balanced have the best of both worlds. The receptivity and inclusiveness of the feminine and the strength and ability to complete and have a single focus when required. They enjoy now a balanced inhale and exhale. So what we're looking for in these last two themes is balancing the inhale and the exhale. The final theme, the gender balanced, male and female, happens in the fourth to the sixth year of life when the gender identity is established, but there is a sense now of not being accepted for their genitality, for their sexual expression. And so that was a threat. They are very strong and energetic and successful in life. They have a lot of energy, but there's a split between their heart and their genitals. And so they have an armor plating around the heart, like no one is going to betray me again, while at the same time either being very sexually exploitative, but not really surrendering, and or intellectually controlling, very competitive. We as breath workers are there not to judge them, but to recognize these patterns and to recognize what their breath is telling us. And as we're aware of our bodies and our patterns, and we go into that more in breathwork training, we are all the more able to help them. So that was a brief overview of the body themes, which we're particularly known for as therapeutic breathworkers.